You're disposable, Everly. My husband smiled as he pushed the divorce papers toward me, certain the judge would approve everything within minutes. But before I picked up the pen, something caught my eye. The agreement jumped from page 8 to page 10, yet the signatures referred to a page that wasn't there. Was it a simple mistake, or had someone removed the most important page in the entire file? Judge Eleanor Hayes slowly closed the folder and asked, "Counsel, where is page 9? In that moment, I knew this divorce was about to become something far bigger than either of us expected. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. And if you enjoy realistic stories about betrayal, justice, and quiet strength, I'd love to have you subscribe and join me for the rest of this journey." 2 years before my husband called me disposable in a courtroom, I would have laughed if someone had suggested our marriage would end over a missing page. At the time, Nathan Butler was the kind of man everyone admired. He walked into every room with effortless confidence, remembered people's names after meeting them once, and had an answer for every problem before anyone else finished asking the question. As one of Chicago's top commercial real estate brokers, he had built a reputation for closing difficult deals without raising his voice. People described him as composed, reliable, successful. I described him as home. We met at a fundraising gala for a neighborhood housing initiative. My company had sponsored the event because we investigated insurance fraud involving commercial properties, and Nathan's brokerage had donated toward affordable housing projects. I wasn't looking for a relationship that evening. I had spent most of my 30s building a career that demanded patience, precision, and long hours. As a senior forensic document examiner, I spent my days studying contracts, signatures, altered records, and disputed financial paperwork. My work wasn't glamorous. Most people couldn't imagine staring at the same document for hours just to determine whether 2 ink strokes had been written 6 months apart. I loved every minute of it. Nathan joked that I probably noticed mistakes in restaurant menus before I noticed handsome men. "I'll admit," I replied after we had talked for almost an hour, "the typo on your event brochure bothered me." He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me tonight." It felt easy, natural. By the end of the evening, we exchanged numbers. For the next year, he became the person I wanted to call first whenever something good happened. When I received a promotion, he surprised me with dinner overlooking the Chicago River. When he closed the biggest deal of his career, I spent an entire weekend helping him organize client gifts because his assistant had become overwhelmed. We celebrated each other's victories. At least that's how I remembered it then. Looking back now, I realized something uncomfortable. Most of the celebrating revolved around Nathan. My promotions became reasons to toast our future. His promotions became reasons to change our lives. At first, I thought that was simply how partnerships worked. We married 18 months after we met. The wedding wasn't extravagant. Just close family, a few friends, and a quiet ceremony overlooking Lake Michigan. Nathan's mother, Linda Butler, hugged me tightly after the ceremony. "I'm so happy you're joining this family," she whispered. "Nathan works harder than anyone I know. Just remember, successful marriages happen when someone is willing to bend a little." At the time, I thought it was harmless advice. Now I understand it was the first expectation disguised as kindness. Over the next year, Nathan's business expanded rapidly. He opened another office, hired additional brokers, started traveling almost every week. The more successful he became, the more often I heard one sentence: "It's just temporary." Temporary dinners canceled, temporary weekends spent answering client calls, temporary vacations postponed, temporary decisions made without asking me first. Whenever I questioned something, Nathan smiled patiently. "I'm doing this for us." It sounded reasonable, so I believed him. One evening, I came home to discover he had already agreed to refinance our house. "I didn't want you worrying about the paperwork," he explained while pouring himself coffee. "You refinanced our home without talking to me first. I knew you'd agree." "That's not the point." He kissed my forehead. "You trust me, don't you?" It was remarkable how quickly a conversation could end once those 4 words entered the room. "You trust me?" Of course I did. He was my husband. Months later, his mother visited for Sunday dinner. While I prepared dessert, I overheard Linda speaking quietly in the dining room. "Nathan carries enough responsibility. Don't burden him with every little decision." "I know," Nathan answered. "Everly has always been independent. She doesn't need to be involved in everything." They weren't whispering because they feared hurting me. They simply assumed I wouldn't mind. That evening stayed with me longer than I admitted. Not because it started an argument, because it didn't. I convinced myself they hadn't meant anything by it. Work remained the one place where I never questioned my instincts. Documents either matched the evidence or they didn't. Facts either supported a conclusion or they didn't. There was comfort in that certainty. Marriage wasn't nearly as tidy. Several months later, Nathan invited me to lunch near his office. He seemed unusually excited. "I've got incredible news." "What happened?" "A group of investors wants to finance our next commercial development." "That's amazing." "It is. There's just one formality." He reached into his leather briefcase and placed a thick stack of documents between us. "A postnuptial agreement." I looked at him without touching the papers. "Why?" "My investors want everything clearly separated. Personal assets, business assets, liability protection. It's completely normal." "I've never heard you mention this before." "It came together quickly." I flipped through the first few pages. Definitions, asset schedules, disclosure provisions, property classifications. Far more complicated than I expected. Nathan leaned back comfortably. "My attorney already prepared everything." "You've had a lawyer working on this. For weeks." "For weeks." "I didn't want to bother you until it was ready." That sentence bothered me more than the agreement itself. I continued reading. Every page looked professionally prepared. Every clause sounded reasonable in isolation. Still, something felt unusually dense for what Nathan described as routine paperwork. "You don't have to read every word today," he said with an easy smile. "Marcus Whitmore can explain anything you don't understand." "I'd rather read it myself." He chuckled. "I knew you'd say that." 2 days later, we met Marcus Whitmore at his downtown office. Marcus projected confidence without arrogance. He shook my hand warmly. "This is standard protection for clients involved in high-value commercial transactions." "Standard?" I asked. "Very." Nathan nodded before Marcus even finished speaking. "I told you." Marcus slid the agreement toward me. "There are a lot of pages, but nothing unusual." I slowly turned each sheet, paragraph after paragraph. Cross-reference schedules, exhibits, appendices. Nathan glanced at his watch. "We're running a little behind." Marcus smiled politely. "Take your time." I noticed Nathan tapping one finger against the conference table. Not impatient, anxious. It was subtle enough that someone else might never have noticed. I almost ignored it myself. Almost. That night, while putting the agreement into our office cabinet, I remembered the expression on Nathan's face. Not excitement, not confidence, relief. As if getting those papers signed mattered far more than simply satisfying a group of investors. 3 nights later, I attended one of Nathan's networking receptions. He didn't know I had arrived early. Standing just outside the banquet room, I heard his voice before I saw him. One of his colleagues laughed and asked, "So everything's protected now?" Nathan answered with a quiet confidence that sent an unexpected chill through me. "I've managed the risk at home." The conversation moved on before I stepped inside. No one noticed I had heard those words, but for the first time since our wedding, I found myself wondering exactly what or who Nathan considered a risk. I didn't confront Nathan about what I'd overheard. If there was one lesson my career had taught me, it was this: people often revealed far more when they believed no one was watching. The next morning, he behaved exactly as he always did. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work. He texted me around noon to ask if I wanted Thai food for dinner. He even stopped by my office that afternoon with my favorite coffee, apologizing for how busy he'd been lately. If I had challenged him the night before, he would have had an explanation ready. "I was talking about business risk. You misunderstood. You're overthinking it." Instead, I smiled, thanked him for the coffee, and said nothing. That silence became my greatest advantage. Over the following weeks, I paid attention to things I had once dismissed. Nathan had always handled our household filing system: bills, mortgage documents, tax returns, insurance policies, investment statements. They all lived in a locked cabinet in our home office. I suddenly realized something strange. For someone who insisted we shared everything, he preferred to organize every important document himself. One Saturday morning, while Nathan was golfing with clients, I decided to reorganize the cabinet. At least that's what I told myself. In reality, I wanted to see whether the paperwork matched my memory. I started with harmless files: homeowners insurance, vehicle titles, retirement statements. Everything appeared normal. Then I found the folder labeled Post-Nuptial Agreement. The document was exactly where Nathan had said it would be. I carried it to my desk and began reading from the first page. The legal language was still dense, but this time, I wasn't reading it as a wife trying to support her husband. I was reading it as someone whose job depended on noticing inconsistencies. The paper stock matched throughout. The staples looked original, the page numbers appeared sequential. Nothing obvious stood out, yet something still felt off. I couldn't explain why. Sometimes experience worked that way. Your instincts recognized a pattern before your conscious mind could identify it. I scanned the agreement into my laptop using the document scanner I occasionally brought home from work. The software automatically recorded metadata for every page. Nothing unusual. Still, I saved the digital copy into our shared cloud folder so I could review it later with fresh eyes. For several days, I left it alone. Then one afternoon, while reviewing a fraud investigation at work, I caught myself staring at a forged commercial lease. The fraudster had replaced only one page. Everything else remained authentic. That single substitution had changed the financial obligations of an entire contract. I leaned back in my chair. Page replacement, not whole document forgery. My pulse quickened. That evening, after Nathan fell asleep, I opened the scanned copy of our postnuptial agreement. Instead of reading the words, I studied the document itself: margins, spacing, page dimensions, compression levels, embedded scanner information. To most people, every page looked identical. To me, page 7 carried a slightly different compression signature, barely noticeable. Not enough to prove manipulation, just enough to make me curious. The following morning, I asked my coworker and closest friend, Alyssa Grant, if she had a few minutes. She looked up from her monitor. "You've got that face." "What face?" "The one you get when your brain has already solved something but won't admit it yet." I laughed. "I need a second opinion." I didn't tell her the documents belonged to my marriage. Confidentiality mattered. Instead, I described them as personal records I wanted to organize. Alyssa compared the metadata. What? Most of these pages were scanned together. And these two weren't. She pointed at her screen. See these timestamps? The difference was less than a minute, 28 seconds. Most people would never notice, but scanners process documents in order, unless pages are rescanned separately. Could the scanner have paused? I asked. Sure. Paper jam. Possible. She looked at me carefully. But something else is possible. What? Someone rescanned individual pages later. Neither of us said anything for several seconds. She finally shrugged. It doesn't prove anything. I know, but it explains why you're making that face. I thanked her and closed my laptop. Driving home, I kept replaying those 28 seconds. By themselves, they meant almost nothing. Combined with Nathan's comment about managing the risk at home, they meant enough for me to keep looking. That evening, I casually mentioned organizing our files. Nathan barely glanced up from his phone. That's great. I scanned some documents while I was at it. His fingers stopped moving for the briefest moment. You scanned everything. Mostly. What for? Just backups. He smiled again. Smart. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds, but I noticed something new. Nathan asked 3 questions about my backups. He didn't ask a single question about why I had decided to organize the office. Later that night after he went upstairs, I logged into our shared cloud storage. The folder containing the scanned agreement was gone. I searched every directory. Nothing. Trash folder, nothing. Archive, nothing. Someone had permanently deleted it. I stood perfectly still. Nathan knew I had made a backup. Otherwise, he would have had no reason to remove it. I checked the activity history. Most deletion records had already synchronized. Only one entry remained visible before the log refreshed. User action completed. No username, no device. Just a timestamp. 11:43 p.m. Nathan had gone upstairs at 11:35. At 11:42, I had been loading the dishwasher. At 11:43, my phone buzzed. Nathan, heading to bed. Don't stay up too late. I stared at the message. It wasn't unusual, but for the first time in our marriage, I wondered whether it had been sent to make sure I stayed downstairs. The next morning, Nathan acted completely normal. Too normal. He even joked about the weather while making breakfast. You look tired. Didn't sleep much. You work too hard. Maybe I did. Or maybe I had spent the night realizing someone inside my own house no longer wanted me to keep copies of our legal documents. Over the next week, I stopped searching openly. Instead, I made notes, dates, conversations, small inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just facts. One evening while cleaning my office at work, I remembered something I hadn't considered before. Our home scanner wasn't the only place that agreement had ever existed. When we signed the post-nuptial agreement at Marcus Whitmore's office, his legal assistant had emailed us a courtesy PDF before the printed originals were delivered. I searched my old inbox. Nothing. Deleted. I searched archived folders. Nothing. Then I checked an external backup. I rarely used one that automatically synchronized years ago before I switched email systems. Thousands of old files slowly appeared on my screen. Most were irrelevant. Meeting agendas, insurance reports, old tax forms. Then I saw a file name that made my heart stop. Butler postnup final sign.idp. I clicked it immediately. The loading icon spun for several long seconds. Finally, the document opened. I counted instinctively. 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, 11. My breath caught. The version on my screen contained one more page than the one currently stored in our house. I hadn't even begun reading the missing page when the PDF suddenly closed by itself. A notification appeared across my monitor. This file is no longer available. I stared at the empty screen for several seconds, trying to understand what had just happened. The file had opened. I had counted 11 pages. I was certain of it. Then it disappeared. Not because I accidentally closed it, not because my computer crashed. It was simply gone. I clicked the folder again. Nothing. The file name had vanished as though it had never existed. I leaned back in my chair, forcing myself to slow down. Panic had no place in my work, and I refused to let it control me now. Documents left traces. People left traces. Even deleted files usually left traces. The real question was whether I could still find them. That evening, Nathan came home carrying flowers, white lilies, my favorite. He smiled as though nothing unusual had happened. I thought we could cook together tonight. The gesture would have melted my heart a year earlier. Instead, I found myself wondering whether it was genuine or strategic. "They're beautiful," I said. "You've seemed stressed lately." "I've just been busy." "So have I." He stepped closer and kissed my forehead. "We'll get through it." There it was again. The comforting version of Nathan, the one everyone loved. The one who always knew exactly how much kindness to offer when someone might begin asking uncomfortable questions. During dinner, he talked about a new commercial project downtown. He described zoning meetings, investor presentations, and construction timelines. Then, almost casually, he said, "Marcus finished reviewing our paperwork." I looked up. "Our paperwork?" "The postnuptial agreement." "I thought that was finished months ago." "It was." He took another bite of salmon before continuing. "I just wanted everything organized in case we ever needed it." Ever. Needed. It. The words settled heavily between us. He wasn't talking about our marriage. He was talking about preparing for its end. I forced a smile. "That's responsible." "I try." The conversation moved on. Mine didn't. The following Sunday, we drove to Linda Butler's house for dinner. Linda greeted us warmly, hugging Nathan first. "My handsome son." Then she hugged me. "Everleigh, you look exhausted." "I've had a busy week." "You work too much." Nathan laughed. "I keep telling her." Linda nodded. "Some women forget that peace at home is more valuable than another promotion." I smiled politely. "My work is important to me." "I'm sure it is." She poured iced tea before adding, "But marriage requires priorities." Nathan didn't interrupt her. He simply continued buttering his roll. Years earlier, I would have defended myself. Now I noticed something else. Neither of them asked what I actually did for a living. To them, my career wasn't expertise. It was an inconvenience. After dinner, Linda disappeared into the kitchen. Nathan stepped outside to answer a phone call. I remained in the dining room alone. On the bookshelf stood several framed family photographs. One caught my attention. It showed Nathan accepting an industry award 3 years earlier. Standing beside him was Marcus Whitmore. Behind them hung a banner from the Illinois Commercial Development Association. The date printed beneath the photograph surprised me. Marcus had represented Nathan years before we even met. Nathan had introduced Marcus as though he were simply another attorney. In reality, they had worked together for a long time. I said nothing, but another small piece of the puzzle quietly found its place. The next morning, I called Marcus's office. His assistant transferred me almost immediately. "Everleigh," Marcus said pleasantly, "what can I do for you?" "I'd like a complete copy of every version of the postnuptial agreement." There was a pause. "You already have the executed version." "I'd also like the drafts." "I'm afraid we generally don't distribute internal drafts." "I signed the agreement." "You certainly did." "I'd still like every version." Another pause. Longer this time. Finally, Marcus spoke carefully. The executed agreement is the controlling document. I'm not asking which one controls. I'm asking for copies. I'm afraid I can't provide documents prepared during negotiations. Even to one of the people who signed them, our representation was for Nathan regarding business structuring. I let the silence linger. So there are earlier versions. I didn't say that. You didn't deny it either. His voice remained professional. If your circumstances have changed, you may wish to retain independent counsel. The conversation ended politely, but I had heard exactly what I needed. Marcus hadn't said the drafts didn't exist, only that he wouldn't provide them. That afternoon, I met Alyssa for coffee. She listened quietly while I described the phone call. I still can't prove anything, I admitted. You don't have to. What do you mean? You just need a source that isn't Nathan. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Think bigger. Bigger. Who else relied on that agreement? The answer arrived almost immediately. The bank. Nathan's company had refinanced several investment properties shortly after we signed the postnuptial agreement. Lenders rarely accepted legal documents without keeping certified copies. If the agreement had been submitted during underwriting, someone outside Nathan's control might still have the original. The idea stayed with me all afternoon. By evening, I had already located the lending institution. The next day, I requested an appointment. The bank's compliance department occupied the 12th floor of a modern office building overlooking the Chicago River. After showing identification and signing several privacy forms, I was escorted into a conference room. A man in his early 50s entered, carrying a slim tablet. Ms. Butler? Yes. I'm David Reynolds, Director of Compliance. I understand you're requesting archive documentation connected to a previous commercial lending review. That's correct. He sat across from me. Our records are confidential, so I can't promise we'll be able to release everything. I understand. What exactly are you looking for? A certified copy of a postnuptial agreement submitted during underwriting. He typed quietly for nearly a minute. Then he looked up. I do see that such a document was included in the original loan package. My heartbeat quickened. Can I obtain a copy? Possibly. He chose his words carefully. It depends on the legal authority for the request and whether the document remains subject to disclosure restrictions. What if it's relevant to ongoing litigation? That changes things. He handed me a business card. If your attorney submits a formal request, we'll review it immediately. I thanked him and stood to leave. Just before I reached the door, David spoke again. Ms. Butler. I turned. For what it's worth, he glanced back at his tablet. Our archive indicates the copy we received was certified complete at the time it was submitted. Complete. One simple word, but it echoed in my mind all the way to the parking garage. If the bank had certified a complete copy, and the version in my house wasn't complete, then the missing page hadn't disappeared before the agreement was signed. It had disappeared afterward. That evening, I sat alone in my car outside our house for nearly 15 minutes before going inside. Nathan was in the living room watching television. He smiled when he saw me. Long day. Very. He muted the television. Everything okay? I looked at the man I had once trusted more than anyone. Then I remembered David's final word, complete. If the bank's archive truly contained the original agreement, then somewhere inside that building was the evidence capable of answering every question I'd been asking myself for months. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized I wasn't looking for suspicions anymore. I was looking for proof. For the next 3 days, I barely spoke to Nathan unless I had to. Not because I was angry, because I was afraid that if I looked at him for too long, he'd realize I was no longer guessing. I was getting closer to the truth. Rebecca Sloan became my attorney that Friday morning. Unlike Marcus Whitmore, she didn't begin our first meeting by telling me what the law usually looked like. She began by asking one question. What can you prove? I appreciated that immediately. Not what I believed, not what I suspected, what I could prove. I handed her a folder containing everything I'd collected. Copies of emails, metadata reports, cloud activity logs, notes from conversations, photographs of page numbers, David Reynolds' business card. Rebecca spent nearly 40 minutes reading without interruption. When she finally closed the folder, she looked directly at me. Your instincts were good. I wish they weren't. I know. She tapped the business card. This bank archive matters. You think they'll still have it? If their compliance procedures are as strict as I believe they are, she smiled slightly, they'll have exactly what we need. Within hours, Rebecca submitted a formal legal request. Because divorce litigation had already begun, the bank agreed to review the request under its document retention policies. Then we waited. Waiting turned out to be harder than searching. Searching gave me something to do. Waiting gave me time to think. Nathan seemed unusually relaxed during those days, almost cheerful. He even suggested we settle everything outside court. It'll save money. It might. We've always handled problems privately. I looked at him. Have we? He hesitated only for a moment. I thought we had. There was something unsettling about how calmly he spoke. Either he truly believed nothing could threaten his position, or he believed every piece of evidence had already disappeared. The following Tuesday afternoon, Rebecca called. They found it. I was already reaching for my purse before she finished speaking. The bank. Yes. They're releasing it. They're releasing a certified archival copy pursuant to the court order. My hand suddenly felt cold. When? I'm picking it up in an hour. I'll meet you there. The compliance department occupied the same quiet conference room where I had first met David Reynolds. He entered carrying a gray archival folder sealed with 2 security labels. I should explain something before you open this. Rebecca nodded. Please. Our lending policy requires that every legal document submitted during underwriting be scanned, certified, and stored exactly as received. He placed the folder carefully on the table. If anything had been missing, our certification process would have required a correction before approval. Rebecca looked at me. Neither of us spoke. David broke the seal. Inside lay a certified photocopy bearing the bank's authentication stamp. He turned the pages slowly. 1, 2, 3. My heart beat faster with every page. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then 9. I stopped breathing. Page 9 existed. It wasn't blank. It wasn't a separator. It wasn't an appendix. It was one of the most important pages in the agreement. Across the top appeared the heading Schedule C, Separate Property Disclosure. Beneath it sat a detailed list of Nathan's commercial investment properties, office buildings, retail centers, industrial warehouses, several LLC ownership interests. Every asset had been individually listed. At the bottom of the page appeared a paragraph I had never seen before. I read it twice, then a third time. The clause confirmed that Nathan had disclosed every separately owned investment property known at the time of signing. It further stated that both spouses acknowledged the schedule was complete and formed an essential part of the agreement. Without Schedule C, several later clauses no longer made complete legal sense. Rebecca quietly exhaled. This changes everything. David continued turning pages. 10, 11, complete. Every page carried matching certification marks, matching scan numbers, matching timestamps. Nothing suggested alteration. Rebecca asked the obvious question. Has this copy ever been modified? David answered immediately. No. Can you verify that? We can. He slid another document toward us. Our archive records every access. Rebecca reviewed it carefully. No edits. No. No rescans. No. No replacement pages. David folded his hands. The document stored here today is identical to the one originally submitted. Silence filled the room. I wasn't relieved. Not yet. Because another question had become impossible to ignore. If the bank received all 11 pages? Who removed page 9 afterward? Rebecca seemed to read my thoughts. We're not finished. She pointed toward the page numbers. Look here. At the bottom corner of page 8 appeared the notation continued on page 9. Page 10 began with another notation. Continuation from page 9. Rebecca looked up. The court copy jumps directly from 8 to 10. I nodded. It does. She smiled for the first time that day. And whoever removed page 9 forgot something. What? The cross-references. I looked closer. Page 10 referred repeatedly to the disclosure above. Without page 9, there was no disclosure above. The wording became awkward, incomplete, almost impossible to understand. It wasn't dramatic. Most people would never notice. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Rebecca carefully photographed every page, every certification stamp, every page number, every margin. Then she stopped again. Everly. What? There's another problem. She pointed toward the certification code printed in the lower corner. Every page carried the same authentication sequence. Except page 11 referenced document package 1111. The court version also ended at page 11. But if the court packet contained only 10 physical pages, why did the certification still identify an 11-page package? Whoever removed page 9 had forgotten to update the certification references. It was a tiny oversight. Exactly the kind of oversight my entire career revolved around finding. David watched us silently. I take it. This is significant. Rebecca almost laughed. Very. He nodded. I suspected as much. What made you think that? I asked. He hesitated before answering. When your request came in, I compared the archive against the filing reference listed in the court subpoena. And the numbering didn't appear consistent. My pulse quickened. You noticed it too. I noticed enough to avoid making assumptions. Professional. Careful. Exactly as a compliance director should be. Rebecca gathered the documents. We'll need certified affidavits. You'll have them. We'll also need chain of custody records. David nodded again. We maintain those automatically. As we prepared to leave, he added one more sentence. There may be one additional record you should request. Rebecca turned. What record? The upload history. What upload history? When lenders exchange legal documents electronically with outside counsel, every replacement file generates a submission log. Rebecca's expression changed immediately. You mean, if someone uploaded a different version later, there would usually be a timestamp, and possibly the submitting account? Possibly. My heart pounded. Until that moment, we knew the agreement had been changed. Now there was a real possibility of discovering exactly when it had been changed, and maybe by whom. As Rebecca and I walked toward the elevator, she clutched the certified copy tightly against her chest. This isn't just about a missing page anymore. I looked back once toward the compliance office. No. She nodded. Now we're building a timeline. Rebecca wasted no time. The morning after we received the bank's certified copy, she converted our growing stack of documents into something far more powerful than evidence. She turned it into a timeline. Her conference room wall slowly filled with printed pages connected by colored notes. Blue for verified documents, yellow for witness statements, green for electronic records, red for unanswered questions. At first glance, it looked like an investigation into corporate fraud. In many ways it was. Only the company happened to be my marriage. Rebecca stood back with a marker in her hand. Let's start with what we know, not what we think. I nodded. She pointed to the first document. Day 1. You and Nathan signed the postnuptial agreement. Correct. The agreement contained 11 pages. Yes. She moved to the next sheet. The complete version was submitted to the bank during underwriting. Verified. Certified complete. Verified. She drew another line. Months later, the version in your home contained only 10 physical pages. Yes. She circled the final document. And the version filed with the court also lacked page 9. I stared at the board. For months, everything had felt chaotic. Now the facts lined up in perfect order. Rebecca smiled faintly. Chaos usually disappears when you organize the evidence. I understood exactly what she meant. That was how I approached every fraud investigation at work. You didn't solve cases by chasing dramatic moments. You solved them by eliminating impossible explanations until only one remained. Rebecca uncapped another marker. Our next objective is simple. The upload history. Exactly. Within days, she filed additional discovery requests. Not accusations. Requests. She wanted every electronic submission connected to the postnuptial agreement. Court filing logs, law firm upload records, bank transmission records, email delivery confirmations, document hashes, version histories, anything capable of showing where the agreement changed. Nathan's legal team objected almost immediately. Marcus Whitmore argued the requests were unnecessary and overly broad. Rebecca expected that. The more someone resists producing records, she shrugged, the more important those records usually become. A week later, Judge Eleanor Hayes granted most of Rebecca's requests. Her written order was brief. If multiple versions of a document existed, both parties had the right to examine how those versions differed. Nothing dramatic, nothing accusatory. Simply fair. Nathan called me that evening. I heard your attorney is turning this into a fishing expedition. I'm asking for records. You already know what's in the agreement. Do I? Silence. Then he sighed. This is getting expensive. I didn't start this. You don't have to make it worse. I don't. Everly, his voice softened. We've spent years together. I know. Let's remember the good parts. For a moment, I almost believed he was trying to save something. Then he added, the judge doesn't need to hear every tiny mistake. Mistake. Not misunderstanding, not confusion. Mistake. I said quietly, Good night, Nathan. He didn't call again. 3 days later, Rebecca's office received the first production of electronic records. Boxes. Actual banker boxes. Each contained printed logs accompanied by encrypted digital copies. Rebecca laughed when the courier left. I haven't seen this much paper in years. We spent 2 full days reviewing everything. Most of it was routine. Email receipts, upload confirmations, internal routing notices. Then near the bottom of one folder, I noticed something familiar. A checksum report. Most people skipped checksum reports because they looked like meaningless strings of letters and numbers. To me, they were fingerprints. Every unique digital file carries a unique hash value. Change 1 character, 1 pixel, 1 page. The hash changes completely. I compared the bank's archived hash with the court filing. Different. Completely different. Rebecca leaned over my shoulder. What did you find? They're different files. We already knew that. No, I pointed carefully. We knew they looked different. This proves they're digitally different. She smiled. Can anyone argue that's normal? Not if they're supposed to be identical. That afternoon, another's production arrived. The electronic submission logs. Rebecca opened them immediately. Every upload had a timestamp. Every upload listed the submitting account. Every upload identified the file size. My pulse quickened. The first upload occurred 3 days after we signed the agreement. 11 pages. Complete. Exactly as expected. The second upload happened nearly 8 months later. Different file size, different checksum, replacement upload. Rebecca tapped the page. There. What? Someone replaced the original. I looked farther down. The replacement had been submitted 46 hours before Nathan formally filed for divorce. The timing wasn't random. It couldn't be. Nathan hadn't simply prepared for divorce. Someone had modified the supporting documents immediately beforehand. Rebecca underlined another entry. Look at the submitting account. The account belonged to Whitmore Legal Group, Marcus's firm. I frowned. So Marcus uploaded it? Rebecca shook her head. Not necessarily. What do you mean? A law firm account doesn't identify the individual. It could have been anyone. Exactly. Paralegal, assistant, attorney, administrator. We still couldn't identify the person. But we now knew exactly when the replacement occurred. 46 hours before Nathan served divorce papers. Rebecca folded her arms. I don't like coincidences. Neither do I. Before we could continue, her assistant knocked. There's one more file. She handed Rebecca a sealed envelope delivered from Whitmore Legal Group. Rebecca opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. Marcus Whitmore had agreed to produce supplemental records voluntarily. Attached were internal routing slips documenting who had requested various filing preparations. Rebecca read silently. Then her eyebrows lifted. What? She handed me the final page. Near the bottom appeared a familiar instruction. Client requested revised filing package prior to submission. No explanation, no details, just one sentence. Client requested. Rebecca looked thoughtful. Interesting. It doesn't say what was revised. No. But it confirms the client requested changes. That's not proof page 9 was removed. No. She smiled slightly. But we're getting closer. The next morning, Rebecca requested depositions from 2 members of Marcus's staff. 1 legal assistant, 1 filing coordinator. Neither objected. Both agreed to testify under oath. Nathan's response arrived that afternoon. He wanted to settle. Immediately. He offered significantly more money than before. More retirement assets. More equity. More cash. Rebecca didn't even look surprised. He's trying to stop discovery. You think so? I know so. Should we negotiate? She turned to me. Do you want more money? I thought about it. Months earlier, I probably would have said yes. Not anymore. I want the truth. Rebecca nodded once. Then we keep going. A week later, the depositions began. The filing coordinator answered routine questions for nearly an hour. Nothing unusual. Then Rebecca asked one simple question. Before the final submission, did anyone instruct you to replace the original document package? The coordinator adjusted her glasses. Yes. My heart skipped. Who gave that instruction? I received it through our internal task system. From whom? She glanced toward Marcus before answering. The request originated after communication with the client. Rebecca remained calm. Did the task specify what had changed? No. Were you told to compare the old and new versions? No. Did anyone verify that every page remained present? No. The witness looked genuinely uncomfortable. I assume the attorneys had already done that. Rebecca thanked her politely. No accusations, no raised voice, just facts. As we left the deposition room, she whispered, "We're almost there." I looked at the folder in her hands. For the first time since Nathan called me disposable, I believed she was right. The courtroom looked exactly the way I remembered from the morning of the hearing. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, rows of polished benches, quiet conversations that stopped the moment the bailiff announced the judge's arrival. I had spent countless hours in conference rooms during my career, but courtrooms carried a different kind of silence. Every word mattered, every pause mattered, and every document mattered even more. Rebecca organized our exhibits with practiced precision. Each binder was labeled, each page tabbed, each reference cross-checked. She didn't believe in surprises. She believed in preparation. Across the aisle, Nathan sat beside Marcus Whitmore. He wore the same navy suit he had worn to one of our anniversary dinners years earlier. The choice wasn't accidental. Nathan understood appearances better than almost anyone I had ever known. He wanted to look dependable, successful, reasonable. When he noticed me watching, he smiled politely. It was the same smile that had once made strangers trust him within minutes. Now I recognized it for what it was, a performance. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Eleanor Hayes entered and took her seat. "Good morning." Everyone stood before sitting again. Judge Hayes glanced through the case file for several moments. "This matter concerns dissolution of marriage and the enforceability of a postnuptial agreement, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," both attorneys answered. Marcus stood first. His opening statement sounded measured and confident. "The parties voluntarily entered into a valid postnuptial agreement after receiving legal advice. While Mrs. Butler now questions portions of that agreement, the evidence will show the executed document accurately reflects the parties' intentions." He never once mentioned the missing page. Not directly. Instead, he emphasized fairness, finality, efficiency. He portrayed the disagreement as a misunderstanding caused by emotional strain during divorce. When he finished, Rebecca stood. She didn't walk dramatically across the courtroom. She remained exactly where she was. "Your Honor, this case is not about regret," she paused. "It is about document integrity." Judge Hayes looked up. Rebecca continued. "The evidence will show that more than one version of the same agreement exists." She held up 2 binders. One certified complete by an independent financial institution. Then she lifted the second. "And one later submitted to this court." "They are not the same." No one spoke. Rebecca didn't accuse anyone of fraud. She didn't speculate. She simply placed the issue before the court. "The question before us is not whether documents differ." She looked briefly toward Nathan. "The question is how they came to differ." Judge Hayes nodded. "Proceed." Rebecca called the first witness, David Reynolds. The compliance director walked calmly to the witness stand. After being sworn in, he explained the bank's document retention procedures. Every legal document submitted during underwriting was scanned, certified, stored, protected against alteration. Rebecca asked straightforward questions. "Mr. Reynolds, did your institution receive a postnuptial agreement involving these parties?" "Yes." "Was that agreement certified complete?" "Yes." "Did your institution later modify any page of that agreement?" "No." "Does the archive remain unchanged today?" "Yes." Rebecca handed him the certified copy. "Do you recognize this?" "I do." "Is this an accurate copy of the agreement received by your institution?" "It is." Marcus rose for cross-examination. Mr. Reynolds, your institution wasn't involved in drafting the agreement. Correct. You cannot testify regarding what happened before the document reached your bank. Correct. You also cannot identify who later possessed copies. Correct. Marcus smiled. So your testimony establishes only what the bank received? Yes. Marcus seemed satisfied. He sat down. Rebecca made no objection. She didn't need to. David had established exactly what she wanted. The bank received a complete 11-page agreement. Nothing more, nothing less. The second witness was the filing coordinator from Whitmore Legal Group. She appeared nervous but cooperative. Rebecca asked about internal procedures, electronic submissions, replacement files, routine workflow. Everything sounded ordinary. Then Rebecca displayed the internal routing record. Do you recognize this document? Yes. It was generated through your firm's task system. Yes. Rebecca pointed toward a highlighted sentence. Please read the final instruction. The witness adjusted her glasses. Client requested revised filing package prior to submission. Did you prepare the revised package? Yes. Did you compare it page by page against the original? No. Why not? That wasn't part of my responsibilities. What were your responsibilities? Submitting the file I received. Rebecca nodded. No further questions. Marcus approached slowly. You never removed any pages yourself. No. You simply filed what was provided. Correct. So you have no personal knowledge regarding who prepared that version. Correct. Marcus smiled politely. No further questions. Again, neither side had actually accused anyone, but another piece of the timeline had quietly fallen into place. During a short recess, Rebecca leaned toward me. Everything is happening exactly as expected. You seem calmer than I am, she smiled, because today's goal isn't to win. What is it? To narrow the possibilities. When court resumed, Judge Hayes began reviewing the admitted exhibits herself. She moved deliberately through both document sets. Every few moments she marked something with a pencil. No one interrupted. Nearly 5 minutes passed in complete silence. Finally, Judge Hayes spoke. Counsel? Both attorneys stood. I have a question. Rebecca waited. Marcus did the same. Judge Hayes lifted the bank's certified agreement. This version contains 11 pages. Yes, Your Honor, Rebecca answered. The judge then lifted the version filed with the court. This version contains 10 physical pages. Yes. Judge Hayes compared them side by side. Then she looked toward Marcus. Mr. Whitmore. Yes, Your Honor. Before we discuss property division, she tapped the second binder gently. I would like to understand why this document references material that does not appear to exist. Marcus frowned. Your Honor, Judge Hayes turned to page 8. This page concludes with the phrase, continued on page 9. She turned another page. The following page begins with, continuation from page 9. She paused. But page 9 is not present. The courtroom became noticeably quieter. Marcus stepped forward. It may simply be a numbering issue. Judge Hayes didn't respond immediately. Instead, she continued reading. Then she looked at the certification code printed at the bottom. Interesting. Rebecca remained perfectly still. Marcus waited. Judge Hayes turned another page, then another. She finally closed both binders. Counsel. Her voice remained calm. Before this court can rely upon any settlement agreement. She looked directly at Marcus. I want the complete electronic submission history for every version ever filed. Marcus hesitated. Your Honor, we have already produced. I am aware of what has been produced. She interrupted gently. I am requesting the original submission history maintained by the court's electronic filing system. Marcus slowly nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Hayes made one final note. The court will recess until those records are available. As everyone stood, Nathan turned toward Marcus for the first time that day. His confident expression had disappeared. He leaned close enough that I couldn't hear every word. Only one sentence reached me. I thought all of this had already been handled. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He simply looked back at Nathan with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't reassurance. It was concern. And for the first time since this case began, Nathan looked like a man who realized the paperwork might be telling a very different story than he had planned. When court resumed 2 weeks later, the atmosphere had changed. The first hearing had been about competing narratives. This one was about records. No one seemed interested in dramatic speeches anymore, not even Nathan. He sat quietly beside Marcus Whitmore, his usual confidence replaced by careful restraint. His posture was still straight, his suit perfectly tailored, but he no longer looked like the man who expected the day to go exactly as planned. Rebecca noticed it too. "He's waiting to see what the system says," she whispered as we organized our exhibits. "The system doesn't care who he is." "Exactly." Judge Eleanor Hayes entered promptly at 9 o'clock. After everyone was seated, she spoke without preamble. "The court requested the complete electronic filing history maintained by the clerk's office. Those records have now been produced." She looked toward the clerk. "Please call the next witness." A man in his mid-40s approached the witness stand. He introduced himself as Michael Chen, Sr., Electronic Filing Administrator for the Cook County Circuit Court. After taking the oath, he explained his responsibilities. He supervised the court's electronic filing platform, maintained audit records, and assisted judges whenever questions arose regarding document integrity. Rebecca approached him first. "Mr. Chen, does the court's filing system maintain a history of documents submitted in a case?" "Yes." "Can those records be changed after submission?" "No." "Why not?" "The audit history is automatically generated by the system. Individual users cannot edit or delete it." Rebecca nodded. "So the court's logs exist independently of the parties." "That's correct." She displayed a printout on this courtroom monitor. "Do you recognize this?" "Yes." "It's the audit history for this case." "It is." Rebecca walked slowly toward the jury box, even though there was no jury. She wanted everyone, including Nathan, to see each page on the screen. "Please explain the first entry." Michael adjusted his glasses. "The initial filing package was uploaded on March 11th at 2:14 p.m. File status: accepted. Number of pages: 11. Rebecca let those words settle over the courtroom. "And the second entry," Michael looked farther down the page. "A replacement package was uploaded on November 3rd at 4:58 p.m. How many pages?" 10. Rebecca remained silent for several seconds before asking the next question. "Did the system record why the replacement was made?" "No." "Did it identify that the file itself was different?" "Yes." "In what way?" "The replacement generated a new digital hash value and a different file size." Rebecca nodded once. "No further questions." Marcus stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Chen, electronic filing systems occasionally experience technical issues." "They do." "So, a replacement filing is not unusual." "No." "Nor does a replacement automatically suggest misconduct." "Correct." Marcus smiled slightly. "So, all we know is that one version replaced another." "Yes." Marcus looked satisfied, but Rebecca had anticipated that answer. She stood again. "Your Honor, may I redirect?" "You may." Rebecca returned to the witness stand. "Mr. Chen, if a replacement file contains fewer pages than the original." "Yes." Would the court's audit log automatically explain why pages disappeared? Yes, no. Would the court itself remove pages from a party's filing? No. So if an 11-page document becomes a 10-page document, Michael answered calmly, that change occurred before the replacement was submitted. Rebecca thanked him. Nothing dramatic, just one more fact. Judge Hayes made another note. Then she turned to Marcus. Mr. Whitmore, who submitted the replacement package. Marcus stood. Your Honor, the filing originated through our firm's electronic filing account. Can you identify the individual user? Our internal credentials route through authorized staff. Judge Hayes nodded. So the firm account, not necessarily one specific employee. Correct. Rebecca didn't object. She had already expected that answer. The court recessed briefly before the next witness. When everyone returned, Rebecca introduced a series of emails obtained during discovery. They weren't sensational. No one confessed anything. No one admitted wrongdoing. Instead, the emails documented routine communication, subject lines, file exchanges, scheduling notes. One message, however, immediately caught Judge Hayes' attention. Rebecca projected it onto the courtroom monitor. From Nathan Butler to Marcus Whitmore. Subject, final version. The email itself was only 2 sentences. Please use the revised version for filing. Let's make sure we're working from the correct package. Marcus stood almost immediately. Your Honor, we object to any implication beyond the plain language. Judge Hayes looked at Rebecca. Counsel. Rebecca nodded respectfully. I agree, Your Honor. Marcus appeared surprised. Rebecca continued. The email speaks for itself. I'm not asking the court to infer intent. Judge Hayes overruled the objection. The exhibit will be admitted. Nathan shifted slightly in his chair for the first time all morning. Rebecca walked toward the screen. Mr. Butler. Nathan looked up. This email was sent by you. Yes. You requested a revised filing package. Yes. Why? There were organizational changes. What kind? I don't remember specifically. Rebecca picked up the certified bank copy. Were any financial terms changed? No. Were any property values changed? No. Were any signatures changed? No. Nathan hesitated. No. Rebecca looked directly at him. So, if none of those changed? She held up the court version. Why did the replacement contain 1 fewer page? Marcus immediately objected. Calls for speculation. Sustained. Rebecca nodded. I'll rephrase. She turned back toward Nathan. Before the replacement was filed, did you personally compare it to the original certified agreement? Nathan paused. I relied on my attorney. Rebecca asked another question. Did you notice that page 9 was missing? I didn't count pages. You never reviewed the final filing. I trusted the professionals handling it. Rebecca thanked him and returned to counsel table. She had accomplished exactly what she wanted. Nathan had publicly acknowledged that he requested the revised package. He had also admitted he never verified what was actually filed. Judge Hayes reviewed her notes quietly, then without warning she closed both binders. Mr. Butler? Nathan stood again. Yes, Your Honor. The judge placed one finger on the certified agreement. This document repeatedly references Schedule C. She lifted the court version. The replacement filed with this court contains no Schedule C. Nathan swallowed. Judge Hayes continued. Yet every subsequent page continues referring to information that would only appear on the missing page. She paused. Can you explain why? Nathan looked toward Marcus before answering. I can't. Judge Hayes remained expressionless. You requested the revised filing. Yes. You benefited from the revised filing. Nathan hesitated. I don't know if I'd characterize it that way. But you agree the revised filing omitted a page that existed in the certified copy?
Yes.
The courtroom fell completely silent. Judge Hayes leaned back in her chair. I am not asking who physically removed the page. She spoke slowly enough that every word carried through the room. I am asking why no one noticed that the legal agreement stopped making sense after it disappeared. No one answered. Not Marcus. Not Nathan. Not anyone. Judge Hayes looked down at her notes one final time before speaking. The court believes one final issue must be addressed before ruling. She looked toward the clerk. I want the original drafting file and every revision maintained by Whitmore Legal Group. Marcus's head turned sharply. Your Honor. Judge Hayes raised a hand. If those files still exist, they may answer a question that no witness has been able to answer today. She closed the binder. Where exactly did page 9 disappear? Nathan slowly sat back down. For the first time since our divorce began, he didn't look frustrated. He looked frightened. Because the answer was no longer hiding inside our marriage. It was waiting somewhere inside his own attorney's records. 3 weeks later, everyone was back in the same courtroom. This time, no one spoke while waiting for Judge Eleanor Hayes to enter. Even the quiet conversations that usually drifted through the gallery had disappeared. There wasn't much left to argue. There was only one question left to answer. Where had page 9 gone? Rebecca leaned toward me before the hearing began. No matter what happens today, don't interrupt. I won't. If Nathan changes his story, let him. I understand. The evidence will do the work. I nodded. That had become the theme of the entire case. Not louder voices, better evidence. Judge Hayes entered precisely at 9 o'clock. After everyone was seated, she looked toward Marcus Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, the court ordered production of your firm's drafting records. Yes, Your Honor. Were they produced? They were. Rebecca stood. Your Honor, both parties have reviewed the production. Judge Hayes folded her hands. Very well. Let's begin. Marcus surprised everyone by standing first. His usual confidence had softened into something closer to professional caution. Your Honor, before additional witnesses are called, I believe it is appropriate to clarify my firm's role. Judge Hayes nodded. Proceed. Marcus walked to the lectern. My office prepared documents based upon information provided by our client. He paused. The evidence establishes that a revised filing package was submitted. Yes, it also establishes that our filing coordinator relied upon materials routed through our internal system. Judge Hayes watched him carefully. Marcus continued. My office has found no evidence that any employee intentionally altered the legal substance of the agreement. Rebecca remained silent. Marcus wasn't defending Nathan anymore. He was protecting his law firm. That distinction mattered. Judge Hayes turned toward Rebecca. Any response? Only one question for Mr. Whitmore. She approached calmly. Mr. Whitmore, yes. When your office prepared the original agreement, did it include Schedule C? Marcus answered without hesitation. Yes. When your office transmitted the certified version to the lender? Yes. Did it include Schedule C? It did. Rebecca nodded. When the replacement package was later submitted to the court? Did anyone in your office independently compare it page by page against the certified lender a copy? Marcus looked genuinely uncomfortable. No. So, no attorney personally verified that every page remained present? No. Rebecca thanked him. She didn't ask another question. She didn't need to. The courtroom now knew something important. Marcus's office had created the complete agreement. The complete agreement had gone to the bank. The incomplete agreement had gone to the court. Somewhere between those two events, page 9 disappeared. The next witness was the legal assistant responsible for assembling client files. She testified quietly. Most of her testimony confirmed what everyone already knew. Then Rebecca asked, when revised documents arrived from a client, "What was your normal procedure?" "I replaced the previous draft with the newest version." "Did you compare every page?" "No." "Why not?" "That wasn't part of my assignment." "Who was responsible for reviewing the client's revisions?" "The attorney handling the matter." Rebecca thanked her. Again, no accusations, only procedures. Judge Hayes looked toward Nathan. "Mr. Butler." Nathan stood. "I have several questions." "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Hayes picked up 2 binders, the certified bank copy, the court filing. She placed them side by side. "You requested that a revised version be filed."
Yes.
"You've testified that you relied upon counsel."
Yes.
"You've also testified that you did not personally compare the replacement against the certified version."
That's correct.
Judge Hayes nodded slowly. "I'd like to understand something." Nathan waited.
You are a commercial real estate broker.
"Yes." "You review contracts regularly."
I do.
"You negotiate transactions involving millions of dollars."
Yes.
She leaned forward slightly. "Yet, you're asking this court to believe you submitted a revised legal agreement affecting your own property rights without confirming that every page remained intact." Nathan hesitated.
I trusted the process.
Judge Hayes looked down at the documents.
Did you?
Another pause. Nathan's confidence was beginning to crack.
I trusted my attorney.
Judge Hayes spoke gently. "Mr. Whitmore has already testified that his office relied upon documents supplied by the client." Nathan glanced toward Marcus. Marcus didn't look back. For the first time in years, Nathan had nowhere to redirect responsibility. Rebecca stood.
Your Honor, may I ask one final series of questions?
You may. She approached Nathan.
Mr. Butler.
Yes.
Did removing Schedule C benefit my client?
No.
Did it reduce the amount of property disclosed within the agreement?
Yes.
Did it affect how the remaining clauses were interpreted? I don't know.
Rebecca held up the certified agreement. The court has already heard testimony that Schedule C identified your separately owned commercial properties. She waited. Nathan said nothing. Rebecca continued. Those properties represented several $1 million in value.
Approximately.
And Schedule C no longer appeared in the version filed with the court.
Correct.
She took one step closer. Did you notice that before today's hearings? Nathan looked exhausted. His shoulders dropped. Finally, he answered honestly.
No.
Rebecca remained calm. You never noticed. No. You never asked why an 11-page agreement became 10 pages.
No.
You simply requested that the revised version be filed.
Yes.
Rebecca nodded. No further questions. Nathan slowly sat down. The courtroom remained silent. Judge Hayes reviewed her notes for several minutes. No one interrupted. Finally, she spoke. This court has considered the testimony carefully. She looked toward both attorneys. The evidence does not establish who physically removed page 9. Nathan seemed to exhale, but Judge Hayes wasn't finished.
It does establish something equally important.
She lifted the certified agreement.
The complete agreement disclosed assets in one manner.
She lifted the court version.
The incomplete agreement materially changed that disclosure.
She paused.
The replacement version was submitted at the client's request.
Another pause.
The client benefited from the omission.
Nathan lowered his eyes. Judge Hayes continued.
Whether the omission resulted from intent or extraordinary negligence, the court cannot rely upon a document whose integrity has been compromised.
Rebecca remained perfectly still. I barely breathed. Judge Hayes closed the binder. The postnuptial agreement is therefore unenforceable. Nathan closed his eyes. His entire settlement strategy had just disappeared. But there was still one final ruling. Judge Hayes continued. Furthermore, she looked directly at Nathan. This court finds that Mr. Butler failed to exercise reasonable care regarding the accuracy of legal documents submitted on his behalf. She turned toward the clerk. A copy of today's findings shall be forwarded to the appropriate professional licensing authorities for whatever review they consider appropriate. Nathan looked up immediately, not at the judge, at Marcus. Marcus simply lowered his eyes. There was nothing left for him to say. The courtroom adjourned 15 minutes later. As people slowly gathered their files, Nathan walked toward me. For the first time in months, he looked smaller, not physically, emotionally. I never meant for this to happen. His voice was barely above a whisper. I looked at him for a long moment, then I answered truthfully. I believe that. He seemed surprised. But you meant for me to sign whatever was put in front of me without asking questions. Nathan couldn't answer. You didn't think I would notice. His eyes filled with regret, or perhaps fear, maybe both. I underestimated you. I shook my head gently. No, you underestimated the truth. I turned and walked toward the courtroom doors. Behind me, I heard no footsteps, no arguments, no apologies, only silence. And for the first time since Nathan had whispered that I was disposable, I realized his opinion had never determined my worth. It had only revealed the limits of his own character. The final judgment was entered 31 days later. I didn't feel nervous walking into the courthouse that morning. I felt ready. Not because I expected everything to go my way, but because for the first time in a very long time, I knew that whatever happened would be based on facts instead of assumptions. Judge Eleanor Hayes reviewed the final order with the same steady voice she had used throughout the entire case. The court declared the postnuptial agreement unenforceable. Without a valid agreement, our marital estate would be divided under Illinois law using equitable distribution principles. It wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a reward. It was simply the fairest legal path available after the integrity of the agreement had been compromised. Nathan retained property that clearly belonged to him before our marriage. I retained property that clearly belonged to me. Everything acquired together during our marriage would be divided according to the evidence presented, not according to an agreement the court could no longer trust. The ruling was exactly what Rebecca had hoped for. Balanced, transparent, defensible. Before concluding the hearing, Judge Hayes addressed Nathan one final time. Mr. Butler, he stood. As this court has already indicated, today's findings regarding the altered filing will be forwarded to the appropriate licensing authorities. Nathan nodded quietly. I understand, Your Honor. The purpose of that referral is not to determine guilt. It is to allow the proper agency to evaluate whether professional standards were met. Yes, Your Honor. There was no dramatic outburst, no angry objection, no desperate plea. Nathan simply accepted it, perhaps because he finally understood that the consequences no longer belonged to our marriage. They belonged to his professional choices. When the hearing ended, Rebecca gathered her files and smiled. You did exactly what you needed to do. I almost didn't, but you did. I kept thinking I should have confronted him sooner. Rebecca closed her briefcase. If you had confronted him before you had evidence, he would have had time to explain everything away. I nodded slowly. She was right. Patience had never been about waiting. It had been about preparing. Outside the courthouse, Chicago was beginning to wake beneath a bright autumn sky. People hurried toward offices, buses rolled past. Someone laughed across the street. Life continued with remarkable indifference. For months, I had believed my entire world was collapsing. The city hadn't noticed. In an unexpected way, I found that comforting. The following week, I returned to work. My supervisor met me near the document examination lab. "We've been saving an interesting case for you." I laughed. "Was that your way of welcoming me back?" It was. The investigation involved altered construction contracts. Ironically, it felt familiar. Tiny inconsistencies, missing pages, digital histories, cross-references. The same details that had helped me protect strangers for years had finally protected me. Only now did I fully appreciate the value of my own profession. Months later, I sold the house Nathan and I had shared. Not because the memories were unbearable, because I no longer wanted my future attached to a place that had taught me to question my own instincts. I bought a smaller home on the north side of Chicago. It wasn't luxurious. It didn't need to be. Sunlight filled the kitchen every morning. There was a reading chair beside a large window. A small office overlooked a row of maple trees that turned brilliant shades of red each October. For the first time in years, every room felt peaceful. One Saturday afternoon, my sister called. "You sound different." "Different how?" "Lighter." I smiled. "I think I finally am." "You know, Mom keeps asking if you've heard from Nathan." "I haven't." "Linda Butler reached out too." I looked out the window before answering. "What did she say?" "She wants everyone to have dinner together." I wasn't surprised. Families often wanted harmony once the difficult part was over. Sometimes they confused silence with healing. "And I told her I'd ask you." I thought about Linda's words during our marriage. Marriage requires priorities. Peace at home matters more than another promotion. Someone has to bend. For years, I believed that someone had to be me. "I hope she's doing well," I said. "But I'm not ready for dinner." "You don't sound angry." "I'm not." "You just don't want to go." "Exactly." There was a long pause. Then my sister laughed softly. "You've gotten really good at boundaries." "I've gotten better at recognizing the difference between kindness and access." She didn't say anything for a moment. Finally, she replied, "I think a lot of people never learn that." Neither had I. Until now. Several months after the divorce became final, I received one last envelope from Rebecca. Inside was the short note. "Thought you'd want a copy. Congratulations on closing this chapter." Attached was the final certified judgment. I read it once, then placed it inside my home filing cabinet. Not because I intended to revisit it often, but because it belonged there, filed correctly, complete, exactly as it should be. Sometimes friends ask me whether I regret the years I spent with Nathan. It's an understandable question. The honest answer is no. I regret ignoring my own instincts. I regret believing that keeping the peace required giving away my voice. I regret accepting explanations simply because they came from someone I loved. But I don't regret becoming the woman who walked out of that courtroom. She trusted evidence. She trusted herself. Most importantly, she understood that respect cannot survive where transparency does not. Nathan once called me disposable because he believed my value depended on how useful I was to him. He couldn't have been more wrong. My value was never determined by someone's willingness to appreciate it. It existed long before we met, remained throughout our marriage, and stayed with me long after it ended. The missing page didn't save my future. It simply revealed the truth that had been there all along. And once the truth was complete, so was I. The hardest betrayals are rarely committed by strangers. They come from people we trust enough to stop asking questions. That's why boundaries matter so much. A boundary is not a punishment, nor is it an act of revenge. It is a quiet decision to protect your peace, your dignity, and your future when someone repeatedly proves they cannot be trusted with them. If you've ever been made to feel small, ignored, or manipulated by someone who insisted they were acting for your own good, I hope this story reminds you that paying attention is not the same as being suspicious. Asking questions is not disrespectful. Wanting transparency in your relationships does not make you difficult. And forgiveness, when it comes, does not require reopening doors that were closed for good reason. Justice doesn't always look like dramatic victories. Sometimes it looks like walking away with your integrity intact, knowing you chose truth over comfort and self-respect over approval. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts or experiences in the comments. And if you enjoy thoughtful stories about family betrayal, resilience, and healing, consider subscribing so we can continue these journeys together. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.